All right, we're kicking her into gear here. Let's do a show. You people game? You must be. You clicked on this. You must be ready to go. I'm ready to go. I was born ready to go. I came shooting out of that little birth canal, my baby butt blazing. My name's Mischke. I said to the doc, how many years you get around here generally? He said, generally a life expectancy for a male here in this country is about 78.7 years. I said, I'll take it and run like a thief. He said to me, you could have an accident or some unfortunate disease and you could have a much shorter life. Or you could just anger someone. You look like somebody who might tick someone off and someone could take you out. And I said to him, I'm being taken out all right. I'm being taken out of the birth canal right now. Get out of my way, doctor. You're blocking the sun. This is kind of our summer Independence Day show. Our celebration of summertime. Why do we so often call it the 4th of July instead of Independence Day? Independence Day takes a back seat to people saying 4th of July holiday. Hey, did you get some 4th of July fireworks? Why wouldn't you say Independence Day? Do you say 25th of December? January 1? Come on. You say Christmas. You say New Year's Day. Why do we say the 4th of July? On your friend's birthday, do you say, hey, happy June 30th there, fella? No, you say happy birthday. But we really love this 4th of July thing instead of saying Independence Day. Very odd. This is our big Mischke podcast celebration of summer Independence Day type show right here. Got a guest after the break who's going to help us celebrate independence. You feeling independent? I'm feeling independent. I feel alive and free and with it. No strings to tie me down, no chicks to hang me up unless along comes Ellen with her long dark hair, crazy ideas about kicks and He-Man, her red Corvette. Oh my God. Off I go, head over heels in a two for the roadblock, playing the lead role in a drama of human emotions that explodes into a nightmare. No. Sorry, got carried away there. How are you? 50 years ago this summer, I got on a city bus with my pal. We went over to Minneapolis. Stepped into a dark theater and we watched Jaws. Remember that one scary scene in Jaws where they come up to the boat in the ocean and they can't find the guy who's supposed to be on the boat? And then there's a scene underwater where they're looking at the bottom of the boat and they're finding a hole in the boat, and there's a shark tooth in the hole in that boat. And Hooper, the Richard Dreyfuss character, grabs the tooth, and then the owner of that boat's face drops in front of that hole. The dead, deformed face of the guy. His head drops in front of that hole, and the whole theater screams. Remember that moment in Jaws? Well, the movie was done. It was finished. It was over. And Steven Spielberg wasn't happy. He didn't have a real horror show moment, a true horror show moment, one of those whole audience screams moments. And he wanted one. So he went into a friend's swimming pool and shot that scene. That wasn't even in the ocean. They shot it in a California swimming pool. Boy, that takes a lot out of it. That's a shame to learn that. I'm sorry I passed it along to you. Anyway, that was 50 years ago this summer. I remember it like it was yesterday. Jaws, as a film, had quite an effect on me. That was the first summer blockbuster, you know. Before then, summer was not the time to go out and see movies. We didn't have the summer blockbusters before then. You'd go to a drive-in, you'd make out with a girl, you wouldn't even watch the film. Jaws changed all that. I probably saw the movie 7 times that summer. Mainly just to see Robert Shaw. Japanese submarine slammed 2 torpedoes into our side, Chief. We were coming back from the island of Tinny and just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb, in case you didn't remember which bomb it was, Chief. 1,100 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes, didn't see the first shark for a half hour. She was a tiger shark. 13-footer. You know how you know the size when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail, and then you multiply that by something and subtract something else I can't remember. I'll never do math again, Chief. Anyway, what we didn't know was that the bomb mission had been so secret, no distress signal had been sent. They didn't even list us overdue for a week. Very first light, the sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups, like old squares in battle, like the Battle of Waterloo. The shark comes to the nearest man, and he starts pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark goes away, sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks you in the eyes, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, Chief? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't even seem to be living. Till he bites you, and those black eyes roll back white. Oh, then you hear that high-pitched, terrible screaming, and the ocean turns red. And in spite of all your pounding and hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces. You know how you know your friends are dead, Chief? They got lifeless eyes, dead eyes like a doll's eyes. You try to talk to 'em and they don't even seem to be living, 'cause they ain't, Chief. You measure 'em then from the tailbone to the neck. I'm not sure why. I'll never do math again, I told you that. By the end of the first dawn, we'd lost 100 men. I don't know how many sharks came in, maybe 1,000. I don't know how many men. They averaged about 6 an hour. I did the math on that using my shark calculator. 6 an hour, that was the average. But I'll never do math again, Chief. Thursday morning, I bump into a friend of mine, Herbie Robinson from Cleveland, baseball player, Bolson's mate. I thought he was asleep, but he wasn't asleep, Chief. He had lifeless eyes, dead eyes like a doll's eyes. I reached over to wake him up, upended. He bobbed up like a top right in the water. He'd been bitten in half below the waist. I measured him from his chin to his belly, 'cause I had always wanted to be taller than him. Noon the 5th day, a Lockheed Ventura sauce, swung in low, young pilot, a lot younger than Mr. Hooper here, really young, too young. The kid was in diapers. Little pilot in diapers, Chief. He flies in low. 3 hours later, a big fat PBY comes down. That was the time I was the most frightened, Chief. Waiting my turn, 'cause I hate lines. I've always hated lines. I was worried it would make me angry and I'd explode and I'd start chewing on the leg of the guy in front of me. That's the last thing they needed when they'd been fending off sharks all week. Robert Shaw coming in, lifeless eyes, black eyes, doll's eyes, chewing on their legs. Is that another shark? They'd say. No, it's me. I don't like lines. They'd try to get away, but they couldn't. And you'd hear that high-pitched screaming, and the ocean would turn red, and I'd shoo 'em all to pieces. Anyway, 1,100 men went in the water, 316 came out. You do the math on that, Chief, 'cause I told you earlier, I'll never do math again. Anyway, we delivered the bomb, which is why I never complain about our rough week when talking to people from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I don't get much sympathy from them, Chief. We lost 800 men, they lost 250,000. But don't ask me to tally up the numbers. I'll never do math again, Chief. I'm done counting. I can't even count on you, Chief, to grip my hand properly and hold on to me when I'm about to go sliding into a shark's mouth. Why didn't you hang on to me? Because of you, I have lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. I'll never wear a life jacket again. Powerful, powerful film. Speaking of Independence Day, I was looking at my thumb this morning. You ever look at your thumb and notice how wildly different it is from the 4 fingers near it? The 4 fingers seem to be part of the same family. They're brothers, buddies. They're tight. And this thumb, I don't know what happened there. The thumb is not a good-looking part of the body, I don't think. The fingers are nice and sleek. The thumb's stubby, but it is independent. It's independent, extremely flexible in a way the fingers are not. The thumb can rotate and flex and swivel. It can kind of pivot. The strength and the dexterity of the thumb just allows us to do so many things. Plus, thumbs have their own pulse. Did you know that? There's a big artery in the thumb, and it's the reason you can't take someone's pulse with your thumb. You got to use an index finger and middle finger ideally together to avoid your thumb's own pulse getting in the way of the reading. The thumb really separates us from the vast majority of animals. I mean, that is our sign of independence. That's us breaking free from other animals. That opposable thumb. Almost everything we've done that's great as people has been aided by the thumb. You lose your thumb, and what really good is your hand? It's been rendered almost useless. The thumb's the key to the whole thing. Without the thumb, the hand is kind of like a flipper. All the fingers move in the same direction. You can't grab anything. And I've read of people who have lost their thumbs. That must be horrible. The bad news, honey, is I don't think I'll be able to help you in the kitchen doing the dishes anymore. The good news is we're still okay on your spanking fetish. No worries there. In fact, I may be more proficient than ever. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going down to the loading dock tomorrow, though, to put in my 2-week notice. Not sure what job I'll be able to get to replace that money. Possibly a professional spanker. Is there a gig like that at all? I mean, I'd still save the primo spankings for you, kiddo. But you may have to put up with me being hired by some of the other neighbor gals. You know, they've all been reading that 50 Shades of Grey nonsense. Even old lady Cutwaller, she was reading it on her porch the other day when I was walking Bo. I said to her, "That ain't what I think it is it?" She said her daughter gave it to her for her 84th birthday. She said she was trying to get the college kid who mows her lawn to try out some of the stuff in the book. Word is, he left her lawnmower running in the backyard and just took off. Hasn't been seen since. Thing ran out of gas 3 hours later. He's probably still running. I may be able to make a little money at her place. Of course, I'm told the older ones bruise a little more easily. I'll need to be careful there, I suppose. We're going to come back with a guest. Soon it will be Independence Day, and we ought to celebrate freedom. Being a free soul on this earth, that's all you really want in this world, to be free.
The dawn of a new age has come.
Freedom.
Have you been butchered, beat up, bludgeoned, bulldozed, bashed around because of the reckless, careless actions of another? Keep those B's in your head right now, because the B's are what you're going to want to remember. Bradshaw, Bryant. They're your law firm people, personal injury attorneys who are going to get you the compensation to make your life whole again, and you ain't going to pay them a buck, not a buck, until they come through for you. Bradshaw and Bryant, when you've been butchered, beat up, bludgeoned, blistered, blitzed, busted, banged into, bonked on the head, Bradshaw and Bryant will get you the bucks. Find them at MinnesotaPersonalInjury.com. Boy, oh boy. Got a story to tell you. Jim and Denise were no bike riders. They did not want to sweat or work that hard on a bike when they went out together. But e-bikes came along, and for the first time, riding together for Jim and Denise became just plain fun. They laughed, they enjoyed the day, they were happy together. They found they could let the throttle do all the work if they wanted and just cruise along. Or they could use the pedal assist feature on their e-bike and pedal some while the e-bike aided their pedaling, getting exercise but not killing themselves. With their e-bike, work went out the window and fun came on in, all because of EcoFun Motorsports in Forest Lake and Burnsville, currently having an e-bike sale that you really ought to take advantage of now because it's a limited time sale. You buy e-bikes online, good luck getting them serviced when you need it or getting parts. EcoFun Motorsports has a full service department and every part you would ever need. EcoFun Motorsports in Forest Lake and Burnsville. Mention the show when you stop on out. My guest is the author of a new book called simply The Ride. The Ride. What ride are we talking about? Paul Revere and the Night That Saved America. Kostya Kennedy, the New York Times best-selling author, has written The Ride. He presents a vivid telling of the events of April 18th and 19th, 1775. 250 years ago, Kostya Kennedy talks about this extraordinary night in America. It's thrillingly written in a dramatic, unstoppable narrative. It offers this wild story to a new generation of Americans who ought to read about this period in history from time to time. Kostya Kennedy can bring it alive for you. That's what we need. We need it to feel alive. I remember as a kid having my mom recite that poem for me.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year.
Longfellow's famous poem. Very few people would know about Paul Revere if it wasn't for Longfellow's poem, written in the 1860s. Kostya Kennedy, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoy being on with you and talking about it.
Paul Revere was in a period when you could have sent a letter. You could have sent a letter to someone. You could have gotten information to someone by writing something down and mailing it. He was trying to get information faster than that.
Yes. There was a postal system. They would ride up and down the post road primarily on the east coast of America, where you could send a letter, just as you're saying. If you were in Boston, you wanted to send a letter to somebody in Philadelphia, you'd write it and give it to somebody, and they'd take it down with a bunch of other letters or packages in a carriage, and it would get there a week later or whatever it might be. Revere was part of a system that Samuel Adams devised called express riders, and they were getting things someplace in a hurry, going basically as fast as you can go, a single rider on a horse. And he certainly was not the only express rider, but he was the best they had.
What did it take to be a great express rider?
I think it took two things. You had to be pretty good on a horse, but you also had to be able to give information completely and succinctly and swiftly, and then move along. John Adams once said of Paul Revere will give you the news. And that meant that he didn't dilly-dally. They trusted him to actually accurately represent what was trying to be conveyed and to pick up information and retain it and bring it along. Often you didn't want to have documents. You didn't want to have a document that might be incriminating in some way, where you found by a redcoat soldier or somebody on the other side. So he had the right temperament, and he was also simply a skilled horse rider.
Not wanting to have documents would be another reason why you wouldn't want to send something through the mail.
Right.
A lot of these rides, the information was in his head. You couldn't get it from him. He was going to deliver it to the person who needed to hear it, and it was going to be delivered as quickly as possible. And there was no one who was going to get the information there faster. I wonder what he loved about that job. He had a lot of different jobs in his life. I found myself wondering this. Did he love being an express rider and passing along any old information? Or was Paul Revere a guy who had come to despise the crown, had come to long for his nation to be independent, and wanted to play the role of express rider because that was the way he could serve the cause?
I think it's the latter. Now, listen, when you're in a movement such as this, a resistance movement, not every day is glamour and glory. There's a certain amount of grunt work that has to be done, a certain amount of information that has to be conveyed that isn't always fireworks. So I think he was aware of that. Listen, Paul Revere got himself very, very close to the corridors of power, the people who were really running the show, meaning John Hancock, John and Samuel Adams, Joseph Warren. These were all people who had gone to Roxbury Latin or another private school, who'd gone to Harvard. And they were also people, the other four I mentioned, who had long histories in the United States. Families had been here. And Revere's father was an immigrant, had come from France. And he didn't go to college. He was literate. He could read and write, certainly, but he didn't go to he went to essentially a trade school. And this was his way of skipping the bounds of class a little bit and being able to be such a fundamental, there's very few people who were as close and as involved in the early part of the revolution as Paul Revere was. And the most famous thing is his ride, but there were many other smaller day-to-day things that he was involved with.
There had to be other important things he was involved with, because I believe at one point you say Paul Revere was known in London. Paul Revere was known in Edinburgh, Scotland. He was a name people were well aware of, and yet he wasn't one of these top founding fathers. Hancock was rich and was funding a lot of this resistance. Other guys were wealthy and brilliant and educated. And he's I don't want to say grunt, but he's a working man. And he's a great writer, and you can count on him, and he does his job well. But he's not a guy who ordinarily would have been anywhere near these fellas.
But he earned their trust, and he did it. The reason they knew him in London, Edinburgh, and places like that was because of his writing. So, for example, when he, in the winter of 74, which is about 4 months before the start of the Revolutionary War and before Revere's most famous ride, Revere took a ride up to Portsmouth to deliver the message that they were afraid that the British ships were coming to take control of a fort there that had weapons. And Revere was saying to the resistance, we have to secure and fortify this fort. Now, when he arrived, the loyalists, including the loyalist governor, knew that Paul Revere arriving spelled trouble or meant that something was up, even if they didn't know exactly what it was. And that was the reputation that he had, and that's why they knew him, because he was somebody who brought the news, as we've been saying, to other places. So the night of the ride itself, which was April 18th of 1775, first thing that Revere had to do was get out of Boston, which was shut down. And it was shut down to not let anybody out. But specifically, as some British soldiers later said, they didn't want Paul Revere to get out. They knew that he was somebody who did these kind of things and delivered these kind of messages. Nonetheless, get out he did, and the rest is certainly history.
Hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea. I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. A hurry of hoofs in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. Through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, the midnight message of Paul Revere.
You got a guy who's great on a horse, a guy who can be trusted, a guy who is solid as the day is long, knows what is expected of him, and can be trusted with this critical information. And if anybody's going to get through, he's going to get through. He's going to have to know all the back routes, all the different ways in case he faces obstacles. He's going to have to be able to ride fast in any kind of weather, any kind of terrain. He's going to have to be somebody who doesn't let harsh conditions slow him down or thwart him in any way. There's this drive you have to have. And I imagine that it would be hard to find 20 other guys like that. Maybe there were a lot of other guys like that, but these are a lot of things that have to come together in one person.
His discipline and commitment are two other really significant words to describe Paul Revere and why he was successful. He was a dynamic person who adapted himself, had a lot of go-go, a lot of energy, and was committed and disciplined. And that's a huge thing. Certainly there were others. You think about anybody taking their hunting gun, their fowling piece or whatever it might be, to go to the greens of Lexington, Massachusetts, and face off against the best trained, best equipped army in the world. And that takes a certain level of commitment. You have a lot to lose, and it could be scary to think of whether you could gain anything. And that's something that comes through when you think about the whole enterprise of the revolution, the courage that it took. And even within that context, Revere was exceptional, which is why he ended up standing out as one of the relatively few people who are remembered and still thought about.
Yeah, when it comes to courage, this is what I think about after reading your book. It's clear to me by the time I close the cover that, number one, a lot of these guys, a lot of our founding fathers, a lot of the people who were responsible for our independence, a lot of them would have had a pretty good life without this war. This war was not absolutely necessary. They weren't being tortured. They weren't being horribly, ridiculously oppressed. You could sit in a tavern in New England and have a reasonable conversation with someone who thought it was a bad idea to seek independence, and the person arguing against independence would have some good points. It seems to ultimately be all about money. It's all about taxes and the failure to honor the colonies by giving them representation in London, in Parliament. But these well-off founding fathers, with their love of reading and the arts and travel, they would have had all that. They didn't need to risk their lives.
Everything you're saying is absolutely right. They didn't need to risk their lives. So what if they paid a little more taxes, right? Many people's lives would have been just fine. And the other point, listen, the French and Indian War ended in the 1760s, not that long before, where, for example, Thomas Gage, who was the head of the British Army at the time of the Revolutionary War, and George Washington fought side by side in the French and Indian War. We were all one people. And that war was financed and held up, and all the weaponry was provided by England and by British manufacturers. And they basically protected the colonists from the French, protected them at other times from Native American incursion. And things weren't great in London in the late 60s and early 70s. They were saying, listen, we need a little bit of payback. We paid for that whole war, and there you are. And it wasn't completely without reason. They didn't wake up one day and say, hey, let's just try to start pulling money out of these guys. They had a real need, and this was their solution. Now, it was a solution that people were not happy with, many people. They didn't want to be taxed, exactly as you say, and the famous saying is, without representation. The other thing that happened in the immediate, and why things really boiled over in Boston, is that the British had sort of moved into Boston Harbor in 1768 and were essentially quartering throughout the city. So that at the time of the war began, there were maybe 16,000 people in Boston and 4,000 British troops. It's almost an occupied area. That didn't sit well. Optically, day to day, that feeling. We had a fledgling judicial and legal system, and the courts were being filled by loyalists, being appointed by people loyal to the crown, loyal to the British government. Other things that did not sit well. So it wasn't entirely taxed. That was a huge thing, but there were other forms of control that the British were exerting or attempting to exert that people didn't like. All that said, many people's day-to-day lives, not only the very wealthy, but even farmers who were sustenance farmers and other people, their lives weren't day-to-day so bad, or, they had made livings and they lived a good life. So it took a commitment to a better way, sort of. It took a commitment to a certain type of freedom. And even when we started, not everybody was gung-ho about this revolution as Boston and other parts of the Northeast were.
The British military stacking their soldiers in Boston was because they were starting to feel it. They were starting to feel this independence movement.
Absolutely. They had tried a couple of taxing maneuvers, something called the Townshend Act and the Stamp Act, and the colonists were reacting to that, rebelling to that, and were not sort of cooperating. And that's when they started to come in to sort of get control of the situation. The heat was increasing, and the tension was getting more and more intense until it finally came to a head.
Yeah, that's something I also was able to feel in your book, was the rising tension. The idea of this boiling water, this slow heating to a boiling point over the years, feeling that and realizing that this is a slow build, but a build, and it's building and building, and the British know it's building, and the Patriots know it's building, and the Minutemen know it's building, and the farmers know it's building. They keep thinking, everybody keeps thinking, there's a possibility still of avoiding war. They know something has to break. But is it necessarily going to be war? At other times, these taxation situations have been resolved without war, where the British maybe back down. And people don't want to go to war. Everybody knows how ugly that's going to be. But it becomes clear as we get to the 18th of April, 1775, that there isn't going to be a way to avoid it. And what is happening that night is hundreds of British troops are heading to Concord. They're going to try to stop this thing before it has a chance to get started by grabbing a cache of weapons and gunpowder. The best way to shut this thing down? Take the weapons. Just neuter these people right now before they have a chance to arm themselves.
Yes, exactly right. Weapons, very principally and importantly, and also medical supplies and salted beef and blankets and tents and axes and things that you would need in a time of battle and war, as well, of course, as you say, ammunition. And you're absolutely right that people were hoping against hope that it wouldn't come to a war. As you said earlier, Tommy, often loyalists and colonists will go to taverns together, go to the same church on Sunday. Even with the tension growing, there was still a common ground. And it got, as you're saying, much more intense, and the tension built and built. But even that night, there was still, it seemed ludicrous when you look at what was going on and think about it. But Gage, who I mentioned earlier, the head of the British Army, still hoped against hope that they could go and get what they needed and come on back. He said, don't fire, don't invade private property. He knew that there would be rogue soldiers on the British side, just as there might be on the colonist side who would do things on their own. But he still hoped that there would not be all this bloodshed. And that's why it became such an issue, still unresolved today, of who fired that first shot on the Lexington Green, because neither side really wanted, quote unquote, the responsibility for having started this event in which thousands and thousands of people would be killed. There was a great reluctance, as there always should be, to war. At the same time, the tension is growing and it does seem inevitable.
You're no investment genius, that I can tell right now. Nope, you're not an investment genius, and yet you want to make sure you're handling your retirement savings properly and intelligently. How's that going for you, exactly? Do you want to blow it and embarrass yourself? Or do you want to use the brain of Josh Arnold for 48 minutes free of charge? The #1 investment mind in Minnesota. Josh Arnold, over 40 years of experience now. You don't last that long if you're not any good. Take advantage of a free 48-minute consultation with Josh Arnold. 952-925-5608. You tell him I said you should ring him.
Investment services offered by Josh Arnold Investment Consultant, LLC, a security and investment advisor. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risk. Tommy Mischke is a paid endorser.
Tommy Mischke is a paid endorser. Some people like Spectacle Shop because it's run by a family, has been for years. Some people love that it's wholly independent, that the people who own it live in the community. Some people don't care about any of that. They just like high-fashion eyewear, not found anywhere else. And they like vintage eyewear, never before worn from 5 different decades of fashion. And still others are drawn to the technical precision of the lenses. Spectacle Shop is famous for crafting precision lenses other optical stores cannot handle, would not have the skill to pull off. Whatever the reason, you'll like Spectacle Shop. Tell them where you learned about them. Stop in. They have 4 Twin Cities locations. Voted best eyewear shop in Minnesota every single year. The Star Tribune has a poll. Learn more at spectacleshop.com. We don't know who fired the first shot. The Loyalists and the colonists are coming together at a place where the Redcoats have a job to do. The message had been sent by Revere and others, here it comes, boys, here it comes, they're coming for us, they're coming for us. Meanwhile, the British have been instructed, we don't want to start a war, don't fire unless fired upon. When you put it all together, don't you think some hothead rebel said, all right, you bastards, let's go?
Sure. That's a very good line of thinking, and it could well be. I'm a little careful with it just because almost anything could have happened, right? Somebody could have literally tripped and pulled the trigger by mistake or something, right? Almost anything could have happened. What's clear is the colonists' appetite for the fight was there, which is, I think, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't fire the first shot for some reason, if somebody else did, they were ready to go. They were ready to respond. Again, in the face of almost insurmountable odds. That's what's so critical about Revere's ride and what happened in Concord and Lexington. After the British got through Lexington, they got to Concord where the resistance was greater and they began to be forced back. On the British return to Boston, that's when the colonists really had at them, fired on them, and really let it be known that they meant business. And the fact that there was this success at the first real battle shaped the whole feeling of the war. If it hadn't been for their success, you could have lost confidence. It's scary. Even if you're the bravest person in the world, you're leaving everything to walk into this cauldron against this army. So the fact that they had a chance and then they could report that down to Virginia and Philadelphia and New York that they'd had the success was enormous.
It's a bad analogy, but I think of Super Bowls where a great underdog takes the offense first and goes down and scores, and they breathe a sigh of relief because they realize, okay, we can play these guys. We can take these guys on. This isn't a team that's so scary anymore. We just showed what we can do. That initial drive, as always talked about, is so important. And battle number one showed that the British were going to have a serious adversary, which they did not think they had. We were talking about the most well-trained, well-armed army on planet Earth. I sometimes wonder how much weight is given to the fact that the rebels wanted it. And if you were a British soldier, what really did you care if these guys got independence or not? Why did you care?
That's true. It was your job, right?
It was just a job.
Paid to be in the army, and it was your job. You had to do it. That motivation is a key thing to bring up. The other thing is that the colonists knew the terrain. So the British were like marching back very orderly and were being fired on from the side through meadows and boulders and trees, almost a guerrilla warfare type of thing, which almost always favors the people who know the terrain better. So I think both of those played a factor. But your point that the Americans were fighting, or the colonists at that time were fighting for a way of life, were fighting for an idea, were fighting for something that was sort of existentially crucial to them in a way that the average British soldier wasn't. Clearly, I absolutely agree that must have had a huge part in the day-to-day will to endure what had to be endured to be successful in battle.
I want to get to the night of the ride and Paul Revere. After reading your book, and the book, by the way, is The Ride, Paul Revere and the Night That Saved America. The ride is thought of by most Americans as a ride on a horse across land. It is equally, in my mind now, a ride across the water. It all could have ended before he ever got to a horse. The start of the ride, quote unquote, is in a boat. He was having to make a dangerous crossing from Boston to Charleston.
Yep. And the river was controlled by a huge warship called the Somerset, whose express purpose, and there were other boats out there too doing this, but the Somerset's express purpose was to make sure that nobody left Boston that night. He didn't know if he'd be able to get out, but he made it across. And when he got to Charlestown, he then had to sort of go to the people he knew and say, I'm here. They didn't know he was coming. Nobody knew that it would be that night. They were prepared for British action to take place at some point, but it could have been a day before, or a day later, or a week later, or anything like that. And they didn't know if Revere would actually get out. So when he got there, they had to find him a horse and get it ready. So the actual land part of the ride began on the other side of that river, a dramatic and very dangerous crossing.
And these guys are supposed to be looking for people trying to get out of Boston. Yep. So, and the moon's out.
Yep.
So he's ducked down in the boat. He's obviously worried about being spotted. And on top of that, he's having to somehow muffle these oars, which we've all rowed boats and know what that sounds like. He has to muffle the sound. I swear, when he was in the boat And obviously I know the outcome, but I'm reading your
Right.
book, and when he's in the boat, I'm far more worried for him there, far more than when he's on a horse, even though he almost gets caught on the horse. But the
Yeah.
boat thing looks ridiculously dangerous to me. I expected the whole thing to be shut down that night on the water.
It's a great point, especially because the British before this brought in all the small boats, brought them close to the big ships, brought them to the harbor. I say that because it's not as if there were a bunch of different boats bobbing out there and there was cover. It was just this boat going across. There's a line in the poem which talks about with muffled oar, and they had taken the petticoat, like the fabric of a woman's garment, and wrapped it around the oar at the oarlock, and that muffled that clattering. And he certainly must have laid low in the boat very quietly. But you're absolutely right. It's a sort of under talked about portion of the ride that could have gone wrong, and then everything would have been different.
There are so many different times this all could have fallen apart. So many different ways it could have gone south. So many things had to work right. When Revere is riding, he's almost captured, goes down a road where the British are there. He is spotted. He's chased. They catch him, and it might have been over before it began. What a lot of people don't realize was that there was sort of an exponential growth to this warning system. It had to work this way, where Revere was the one that first had to get to people who could then get to people who could then get to people, but he had to be the one to get the whole snowball rolling. So if they stop him, there's no snowball. And when he's just about captured, he hasn't done much anything yet.
That's exactly right. He was right near Charleston still at that point. And as you're describing, he would tell people who then got on their horse and would go to other towns. And other towns, you could imagine looking from above, there's this sort of neural network of riders going out. It got to be more than 30, close to 40 riders going out into the countryside and telling people it's time to go. And when you think about, they got to Lexington, we talked about where that first shot was fired. That was at dawn. By the time they're coming back, maybe 6 hours later, 8 hours later from Concord, there are 2,000 or 3,000 colonists along the side of the road firing, taking part in the battle. There's no way one man on a horse can, no matter how good you are, can rally that many people in that short of a time. So it took a system, and there was a system in place.
Does Paul Revere know on this night that this is the night that it all starts? That it isn't a ride like any other ride he's ever made? This is the big one. Does he know it?
Yes. They knew that these British soldiers were leaving en masse from Boston out into the countryside. There had never been a military operation like this.
Did he also know that this night was coming? Not only that this was the night, the 18th into the 19th of April, 1775, but that this night has been coming for a long time. We've all known it.
Yes. I mean, they knew it to some extent. That's why, the lantern system had been devised. They didn't know until it was happening that it was happening then, but they had a good feeling that something was inevitably going to happen.
Do you know what he said? How many different times did he have to knock on a door, pound on a door, stop someone, say something? What did he say? He did not say the British are coming.
No, everybody was still British at that moment.
Right.
So he wouldn't have said that.
No.
But he said the regulars are out. The regulars are what they call the redcoats because they were so regularly seen in the Boston area and on the streets there. So he said the regulars are out, get your arms. And he had to say something about where they're going. They knew Lexington and Concord. John Hancock and Samuel Adams were in Lexington at that time. They had moved out of Boston. That's another thing that we talk about, tension building. Things had just gotten too hot. Vandals were causing damage to Hancock's house. Both Sam Adams and John Hancock were worried about being arrested. So they had a few weeks before moved out to Lexington. Again, it could have been a different night, but the idea that this was coming had been hinted about, planned for, thought about for some time.
I just picture all these guys grabbing their guns, heading out the door, kissing their wives goodbye, looking at each other, saying, "This is it. Game on, fellas." When Lexington and Concord proved to be a success for the rebels, for the colonists. Is it clear to the retreating British soldiers heading back to Boston that this will now be a full-on war, that this won't be a one-off, that a war has begun today?
Certainly to the leadership. Some people just simply wanted to get healthy. They went back and they used that big boat that we mentioned earlier, the Somerset, with a hospital, a medical treatment center for a lot of the soldiers who were coming back. So they almost just had to recover from what had happened.
Yeah.
But certainly anybody in the leadership, they knew, and they knew that they were in for it. I don't know if they knew that it was going to take 8 years of war, but they certainly knew that the battle had just begun.
Will you walk my listeners through your visit to the church where the 2 lanterns were raised, letting it be known that the British were coming by sea, not by land? This attempt on your part to touch history, to feel a part of history that you can still go back and touch and feel. This tower, you were able to get special permission to get up there and to go to the spot where the lanterns were held. And I want to just have you let people know what that little tiny piece of history would have been like on that night for the person going up there. Your telling of going up in that tower got me so close to feeling what it was like that night.
You had to get special dispensation. I'm somebody who, Tommy, I do not like heights one bit. So I was quite nervous, and I had to sign a waiver. When I'm signing the waiver, the guy who was going to lead me up there said, listen, if you fall and you land inside the property, we'll take care of you. But if you land outside the property, you're on your own.
And you wanted to go at night.
I wanted to go at night because that's, of course, when the lanterns were hung. So we go up the 2 sort of standard flights of stairs, and then we go through a door, and there's another staircase. Now it's a little more of a rickety staircase, and it's fairly steep, and then it winds a little bit. And then you get to where the bells are. And this itself is a moment of pause for me, because those bells that are today in the Old North Church and still ring today were brought here in 1740 from England. And Paul Revere actually rung them as a child. He had a job as a bell ringer there. And they're the same exact bells that are still here 250 years later. So you see those bells, and now you go up, and you're going up a sort of a series of ladders. It's almost like switchback ladders. You go up maybe 12 rungs, and you get to a little landing, and then you go to the next series of 12. It's dark, no light, and it's cold. I went in January. There's no insulation up there, and I'm getting really nervous. And again, the guy who I took is somebody who does this here and there, and so he knew the way better. And he said to me, don't look down. So I didn't look down. He said, don't look up. So I didn't really want to look up, but I did look up at a certain point, Tommy, and it's maybe halfway through. And I could see the light from the moonlight coming in through the spire, through the little room up there where we were headed for. And it occurred to me that was the light that Robert Newman, who was the sexton of the church, would have seen. That would have been his only light. And now you're going up further and further, and you get to a point, maybe the whole thing is about 150 plus feet from the ground, maybe 180. And when you get maybe 2 ladders below the little room, wind starts coming through, big whooshing sound, and it's very cold because there are windows there that have no panes in them. They have louvers, but no panes. So the air is just coming through, something that Robert Newman would have had to experience. And then we got up and we get a little higher. Finally, we're up and into the room. And then for me, and this is, I guess, a personal thing, I suddenly wasn't afraid anymore. I had much less exposure. It was sort of a space that maybe 6 people, 4 to 6 people closely together could fit in. Not large, but not tiny. You could see the bend in the river that I knew about where Revere took off from. You could see an old cemetery that Revere would have passed. It's mentioned in Longfellow's poem. And it just brought you so much closer to that night. It's still beautiful. You can see from far. And then I went back down, and along with getting close to sort of feeling it and sensing it and the wood of the place and all of that, you realize that it took me a little while to get up there. And I'm in perfectly good physical shape. I didn't have any limitations in that way. And somebody else had to do that. He had to do it that night. 2 lanterns strapped over his neck heavy lantern by a leather thong, and he had like a tinder box in his pocket to be able to light it when he got up there. You realize what a difficult thing it is to have done that and how that could have gone wrong so easily. And then he had to get up there and light the lanterns, and he held them, spread his arms wide to make sure that you could see there were two, because if you were looking from far away, you might mistake it as one. So he did that, and he knew that the people on the other side would see it. He had to hold it up long enough for it to be seen, but he also knew that the Redcoats would see it as well. And until that moment, they had no reason to suspect, the Redcoats had no reason to suspect any trouble was brewing at the Old North Church on this particular night. But they saw those, and so now Robert Newman had to get down from there and get away, avoid capture from the British. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure. Incredible to think of somebody doing that, right? A guy who works as a sexton at a church. He lived at home with his mom. He's in his 20s, and he's doing this incredibly important act for the revolution.
Yeah, it's that old idea that in the microcosm, sometimes it's the best place to be to understand the macro. It's in that individual moment that you realize all the individual moments that had to come together for this independence. It's extraordinary to walk through these nuanced takes on these individual efforts, and it really helps me feel closer to these people, this time, and this extraordinary event. So I want to congratulate you on your success with the ride, Paul Revere and the Night That Saved America. This is 250 years ago, and you helped make it feel like it wasn't that long ago at all.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being on with you and talking about it. Great questions. You clearly read and understood the book, and so it was a pleasure to be on with you. Take care.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You watch the residents take in an actual aviary, enjoying the birds. Watch them gathering in the lounge, by the spa, the whirlpool. You see them busy in the activities center or at the ice cream shop or the cinema or the salon, and you say to yourself, what? This is a memory care facility? Yeah, it's the best of them. 4 different quadrants for the 4 different stages of memory care. The residents there, happy, engaged, alive. Picture your loved one there. You won't go elsewhere once you've toured the Welshire, because no other place has come this close to perfecting memory care, focusing on nothing else. The Welshire of Bloomington and Medina. You love these family members of yours. Take them to where they'll be loved. The Welshire. Remember when you would call a business and they'd answer the phone? There'd be a person there, a warm-blooded human being on the other end of the line, and they'd talk to you. A decent soul would be there, just looking to help you out with whatever you needed. For you people out there who use industrial pressure washers, there's a place that services them, sells them, sends repair trucks out to you, that stocks thousands of parts, that's been around as long as pressure washers have been around, and they answer their phone. They talk to you like a human. American Pressure is the kind of business you can have a relationship with, you can feel connected to. American Pressure. Someone to talk to about all your pressure washer needs. You know, like people used to do, just talking, like a regular person. You people who use pressure washers on the job, you're lucky. There's someone for you. Me, I have to call my internet company. It is going to be a nightmare. Learn more at AmericanPressure.com. Well, I think it's time to call some listeners. Let's check in with the audience. Wally, can you help me out there?
I'd love to help set that up, Mischke. Let's get this show on the road. I'm dialing the numbers now, getting the listeners on the line. All right, first listener's coming through. Ready for the chat?
I'm ready, Wally.
Ring, ring.
Hello.
Well, hello there, Samantha. This here's Mischke.
Oh, hi, Mischke.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Appreciate you adding your name to the callers list. You're the youngest person to do so.
I'm 13.
13 years old. Boy, I barely remember that age, but I was that age once. At one time, and I probably would have been very similar to you. I would have put my name in to some callers list at a radio show, or podcast in this case. What prompted you to do that, to add your name?
My mom told me to do that.
Your mom bossed you around, did she? Told you to do that and you were grounded if you didn't? What do you do with your life, Samantha?
I just sit around and watch TV a lot.
You sit around and watch TV a lot. What would you like to be, say, when you're 27 years old?
Police officer or something to do with the law.
Really? You are the first young woman I've ever spoken to who wanted to be a cop.
I know that you're being sarcastic. I can detect sarcasm very well.
Well, you're doing a poor job of it right now because I wasn't being remotely sarcastic. I have not spoken to a young woman in my life who has said to me I'd like to be a cop.
That's literally one of the most common jobs that someone wants to be, isn't it?
I don't know if it's the most common job young women have wanted to be.
Oh, yeah.
What is it about being a cop that attracts you? Is it the idea of drawing your weapon and blowing someone away 6 ways to Sunday a la Dirty Harry?
It's justice.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? Samantha, Samantha. Draw your gun, son. Boom, laka, 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 boom, laka, laka, laka. I don't know what's happening to me right now. Let's get back to being a cop. So you want to be someone who brings justice to the injured.
Justice against the criminals. I want to stop people who want to kill people and stop people who want to rob banks.
That's inspiring.
Most people are bad.
Actually, I want you to have a little bit more fun in life. I want you to relax more. I want you to get away from the television. I want you to worry less. The adults can do the worrying. This is a time for joy, for fun, for frivolity.
Okay, can I let you go now?
Yeah, you can let me go now.
Bye.
Well, an encounter with our youth. All right. That's what we're looking at, people. I've seen the future, and it's coming with a gun. You got some listeners for me, Wally?
I'm lining up the calls right now, Mischke. Yep.
Just grab them randomly off the callers list, Wally.
All right, I'm grabbing them randomly now.
Hello?
Hello, and this is Wally. We've got Mischke on the line, and we're ready to talk.
Oh my God, no way.
So you weren't expecting the call?
No, not one bit.
Well, here it is. You and I together on the show. What do you know?
No, you're the best, man. I'm probably the youngest viewer you got.
How old are you?
I'm 22.
Hey, I just called a 13-year-old.
Oh, okay, never mind.
What do you do with your time?
Trying to move back in with my grandparents. Getting the basement all cleaned up for myself.
Why are you doing that?
Oh, you know, they're approaching older age and
Oh, you're gonna care for them.
Yeah,
Oh,
yep.
good man. Good man. That's the old European model, where the different generations take care of one another, and the young grandkids take care of the uncles and aunts and the grandpas and grandmas, and everybody works communally. That's lovely.
Here I am.
You don't sound very happy about it.
Well, you know, you still kind of got my heart racing, Mischke. Man, I love your stuff.
I'm sorry to just call out of the blue, but that's the way it works on this show. If you warn people you're going to call, then they start to develop this whole persona thing. I've seen it happen time and time again. Best just to make it all natural. You're doing just fine, by the way. Talking to you is like talking to my kid brother. It's all good. Well, you'd have to be a lot older to be my kid brother. We'll just say it's like talking to a recently adopted foreigner.
Yeah, okay.
I'm curious what you enjoy doing with your life.
Man, I love baseball.
What a beautiful thing to love. Isn't it a great game?
My grandpa, I hated sports, and then my grandpa got me into baseball, and now I'm a big sports guy.
In many ways, I like the theater as much as anything. I like the spectacle of it. I love the personalities. I love the theater. I love the little side attractions. I love the concessions. I love the smell of grass. The last time you found yourself crying while watching a baseball game?
Last time I found myself crying while watching a baseball game. Well, I'll have to be honest with you. In 2023, when the Twins playoff run came to an end, I shed a tear.
If you're a true fan, you will cry. I cried so often over the years, sometimes tears of joy. I sat there in the stadium in 1987, crying like a little child after we beat St. Louis to become world champions. I remember just weeping because I had been born in 1962 and I had been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. I used to go to Twins games by myself as a kid on the bus. I'd get on the bus with my bad tennis shoes and black socks and baseball mitt, looking like a dork, and I'd go out to Met Stadium and sit by myself with about 13,000 other people on a beautiful day and watch the Twins lose and go home on the bus. So in 87, when I watched the impossible, and I thought it was impossible because Minnesota teams don't win world championships, I sat there crying, people around me looking at me, tears just falling. Well, what do you want to do with your life?
Well, I'm not only taking care of my grandparents. I'll be going back to school part-time, and hopefully I could be a sports journalist one of these far future days.
You went from not liking sports at all to now wanting to be a sports journalist?
Oh, it's my life now.
What? I'd like to meet your grandparents. What kind of effect did they have on you?
Oh, they're everything, man.
Your grandparents are everything. You're a lucky son of a gun, you know that? I didn't have that kind of relationship with my grandparents. That's beautiful.
They took care of me when I needed it, and now they need it, so...
I don't want to go into areas I shouldn't, but are your parents involved in any way, shape, or form?
Just a quick rundown. It's been a long time, so I don't have a lot of emotions, but my dad went away when I was young, and my mom passed on me when we lived together, so...
I'm very sorry to hear that, but I cannot tell you how delighted I am to hear that you have these wonderful grandparents.
Yeah, I love them.
So you think you and your grandpa are going to go to some ball games together?
Yeah, he's waiting for the weather to get a little nicer.
You and your grandpa at a ball game together. I'd like to be there just watching you guys. I mean, you'd be watching the game, and I'd be turned around just watching you guys. I'd just look at you. I'd love that.
I actually thought I saw you at a game. Gosh, your voice is just so distinct, and there's this, decently older guy sitting next to me at the ballpark, and he just sounded like you. The whole game, I just tried to wrap my head around it. Is this Mischke? Am I going to go up and say hi?
Well, I'm glad you listened to the show. I'm glad you offered your name to the callers list. And
anytime.
I found it interesting this week that the people I called were on the younger end, but that thrills me.
I got one last thing, Mischke. Your episode, Is Everybody Happy? Could you just give me that one more time?
Is everybody happy?
You made my day, Mischke, and you'll continue to do it every Friday. I appreciate you,
man. All right. So long. Thanks much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for the show. I do have some news to report, however. The week after next, that's the week of July 7th, there will be 2 roughly 50-minute podcasts offered per week instead of this one podcast. 2 50-minute podcasts will come out each week starting the week of July 7th. There will be a Wednesday and Friday show, respectively. 50 minutes is often a maximum listening time for a lot of people. This has been pretty well researched. There are a lot of 20-minute and 30-minute podcasts out there, and there are obviously some truly monster long-form podcasts as well. But I'm going to land in that 50-minute range, roughly, and put out 2 of those per week. This is going to mean 104 podcasts a year now. Rather astounding to me. given that the prior gig I had, the Mischke Road Show, offered just 12 podcasts a year for the 11 years that I offered the Mischke Road Show. Now 104. 104 shows a year sounds like a lot until I tell myself at KSTP Radio I did 240 shows a year.